Hello, everybody. My name is Cheyenne, and I actually am doing these videos to kind of talk about my journey with breast cancer. I am in remission at this time. I'm currently 1 year and 4 months post surgery, and I wanted to do these videos a lot sooner. I actually came up with the idea to do these videos before I started chemo. I wanted to do the videos to document what was going on through my different treatments. I just didn't anticipate how tough it would actually be and how many side effects there were uh when I went through it. So I'm getting to it now, and I just wanted to talk about it and start with diagnosis. I actually found the lump in June of 2020. That night after I got out of the shower, I decided for some reason to do an exam. And I don't know why, because I never really did exams like I should. And I do recommend to every woman, no matter the age, to give yourself an exam. I was 33 years old at the time of diagnosis. I never thought in a million years that I would get diagnosed with breast cancer, not that early. But I did the exam that night and I found a lump in my left breast underneath. And when I found it, I could tell it was unusual. It was really hard, really solid. I mean, my brain wanted to say, oh, maybe it's an abscess. Maybe it is tissue that's harder than the other tissue. But I mean, regardless, I knew that I would have to get it checked out. I even had my husband check it out. And I mean, nobody wants to say, oh, it might be cancer. So we tried to be positive, but something deep down told me that it wasn't right because about an hour after I found it, I broke down in tears. I had just had my youngest daughter 4 months prior to that, and my oldest was only 6 at the time. And I remember thinking, they're not going to remember me, especially my youngest. She's not going to have any idea of who I was or who I am. And that thought just tore me up. I was so upset that night. Sorry about that. Um, but I pulled myself together. I knew that I had to get it checked out, as scared as I was. And I made an appointment with my OB first thing the next day. I knew they wouldn't be able to tell me much at that appointment, but I wanted to just get it checked out and get the ball rolling on everything. So I went in, and of course, it felt unusual to them too, enough that they had me go in to get an ultrasound on it, which I think was just a couple days after. And from the ultrasound, when they read the results on that, they couldn't quite tell me what it was, but it was suspicious enough that they thought I should get a biopsy. And that's when I really started to get nervous because I was like, what, is making them, think that it might be something bad? I mean, from an ultrasound, shouldn't they be able to tell? Obviously it's not an abscess or just fatty tissue. And I started to get really nervous at that point. Um, I almost didn't want to go get the biopsy. I just wanted to just be like, no, it's fine. Everything's fine, especially with everybody, friends and family saying, oh, I've had lumps before and turned out to be nothing. You're young. Everything will be okay. Um, but I went and got the biopsy done anyways, and that was pretty nerve-wracking. Never had one before, but it was easy. They just numbed the spot really good. It actually looked worse after the biopsy than actually getting the biopsy itself. My whole chest turned black and blue. Um, and I wanted to say that was around June 14th or 15th that I got that done because they told me that I would have the results in 3 or 4 days. So it was really scary, waiting for the results of that biopsy. It was about to be Friday. It was Father's Day weekend, which is really sad now that I think back on it. And I was expecting the results that Friday. It was getting late in the day. I remember it was about 3 o'clock. And I was thinking, oh, maybe they're not going to call me with the results today. My office is going to be closing at about 4. But I took the kids out back. We had a swimming pool in the back, and I took my kids and my niece out swimming. Just wanted to do things as normal. And my phone rang at about 3:30. Um, I picked up, and I just remember hearing, "You have invasive ductal carcinoma." And I had to stop and really think about it and like, carcinoma. Oh my God, cancer. But I said, what was that? Because it's like I couldn't comprehend what she was saying to me. And she said, you do have cancer. You have invasive ductal carcinoma. We're going to get you set up with a surgeon. And she said some other things, but my brain was so wrapped up in, oh my God, I have cancer. I didn't quite hear anything else she'd said to me. I mean, besides that she was going to set me up with a surgeon and get me started on whatever treatment plan that I would have to go through. The place that I lived at was an actual apartment building, and my parents and my sister lived across the hall in the other apartment from me. And everybody knew I was supposed to be getting that phone call. So um, the bathrooms, actually, the window faced the backyard where I was in the pool with the kids. My sister heard the phone ring, and knowing that I was supposed to be getting that important phone call, she sat and listened at the window. And at first, she thought nothing of it because I was just being really polite and just sounded normal. But when I hung up the phone, I got out of the pool really quick and I started to cry. So she ran out and told my parents that she didn't think it was good news. So right after I hang up, that's when everybody was coming out back, and it was just a whirlwind around me. But at the same time, it was like everything was going in slow motion. I couldn't even, it was just so, I couldn't comprehend that I had breast cancer. I knew it was happening to me, but it was almost like I was watching it happen to somebody else. It was like a dream. I, it didn't hit me right away. It did in one way, but not really. I cried and I was upset, but it was more because I was watching everybody else have this really strong response to it. And I still had to go up and tell my husband, which was extremely hard. We've been together since we've been 18 years old, and I mean, obviously, it would be extremely hard on him. The whole weekend, I couldn't tell you what happened that weekend. It was a complete blur. Um, I don't remember anything. After that call, it was, I mean, my life had just got turned upside down. The next thing I really remember clearly is that Monday going in to meet the surgeon that was going to be removing the cancer at the time of surgery. And she's the one that told me what kind of cancer I had. I mean, that's how naive I was. I didn't even realize there was different types of breast cancer. I actually had an aggressive form, and it's the rarest type. It's triple negative breast cancer. Some breast cancers are run by hormones, and others are not. Mine doesn't feed off of anything, it just grows. Just like at the opposite end of the spectrum, you can have triple positive breast cancer, where it is run by all hormones and HER2. Um, that's also an aggressive form of breast cancer. But I had the triple negative, and the outcomes aren't as good with triple negative. Um, the treatments that they've come up with, um, I mean, as of right now, they are working really hard to get better treatments for triple negative, and but because it's the smallest population of women that doesn't have all the treatment plans that the other breast cancers have. Um, so the outcomes aren't as good. They do the best that they can with it. But I found out at the surgeons that my treatment plan would include chemotherapy. And I was extremely scared upon hearing those words. I knew that I'd be losing my hair. I knew that I'd become really sick. And I always remember thinking through life, like, I don't think I could go through chemotherapy. I don't think I'd be strong enough to do it. And here I was faced with the fact that I wouldn't have a choice in the matter. I was going to have to go through chemotherapy if I was going to try to survive this. I was so upset. I mean, I didn't cry at that appointment. I was still in that dreamlike state. I was still not completely like understanding of everything, and it hadn't completely hit me yet. I was still processing everything. So, also, I forgot to say at the time, the day that I found out that I had cancer, I actually called the place that did the biopsy to find out the measurements of the cancer, and the lady had told me 5 centimeters. Now, looking up and Googling that, which I don't recommend, um, 5 centimeters is on the large side, and usually that means stage 4 or stage 5. So at that point, I believed that I had found it late. So we didn't think the outcomes were going to be very good because for triple negative, finding triple negative breast cancer in stage 4 or stage 5 is usually a death sentence. Um, I mean, they can do aggressive chemo and it's not a death sentence for everybody, but the outcomes are not nearly as good as for other types of breast cancer. So I was also dealing with that, thinking that I had stage 4 or stage 5. Um, I learned that I would meet with my whole team, including the oncologist and the nurse navigator and the nutritionist. I would be doing all that a few days after that, which was on a Wednesday. I would be going up to the cancer center and meeting the whole team, and talking further about the treatment plan and what would be going on from there. So, come Wednesday, I was so scared pulling up to the cancer center, which was actually connected to one of the hospitals near me. And for some reason that day, I think it was because my oncologist was just working on the pediatric floor for the cancer center that day, I had to actually go to the pediatric cancer floor. And that was so sad. Um, and that made me think, here I am, 33, feeling bad that I'm getting diagnosed with breast cancer, but there are children, little kids, um, my kids' age that are dealing with this, and if they can deal with it, then I really need to suck it up and do what I could to fight it. So I meet with my oncologist. We start going over the treatment plan, talking about the chemo, the side effects, when it would start, what would really be happening. I was finding out that the treatment plan that I was getting was called the ACT uh, chemo plan. It's uh, doxorubicin, Cytoxan, and Taxol. Doxorubicin being one of the toughest chemos to actually go through. It's the one that makes you extremely sick, throwing up, not able to go out the sun. Your white blood cell counts go down really low. That's why after each treatment, I would have to go in and actually get a shot the following morning to raise my white blood cell count so it wouldn't dip extremely low. Because I was more with that, I was more prone to infections and getting extremely sick. I would lose my hair. Um, but what I didn't know, and I found out that day, that more than likely I would no longer be able to have kids. I didn't realize that chemotherapy would destroy the rest of the eggs that I had. Now, at the time, I didn't plan on having any more kids, but just the fact that that choice was being taken away from me absolutely devastated me. I was so upset at that point. I just wanted to run. I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to talk to the doctors. I was so upset. I remember messaging my husband. I told him I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't do it. I wanted to run. I mean, he was able to talk me down, be really calm, and, you know, walked me through it and actually got me to stick around and stay in that room because I'm telling you, I just wanted to get as far away as I possibly could from this and forget about all of it. And that's the thing. It's such a life-changing event. Once it happens, you can't go back to that, you know, ignorance is bliss state. You can't get that back. The thought of death was no longer way over here. It was right at my face. It was something that was a big possibility and that I had to deal with. I couldn't just pretend that it wasn't happening. That wasn't an option. So I sat down, I talked with everybody, and remember being so upset that when the nutritionist asked if the student doctors could come in, I said no, which usually I have no problem with. Um, but for some reason I felt like I didn't want them to see me the way I was, falling apart, a complete mess. You know, I didn't want their sympathy. I just didn't want to deal with that. Um, it was a few hours that I was there that day. I did end up getting through it. Got all the paperwork, went home and looked it over. It had all the side effects, everything that could happen, go wrong with the chemo, which scared me even more. I found out that I would be starting chemo about 2 weeks out, which ended up being the weekend after, the Wednesday after the 4th of July weekend. I believe 4th of July was on Saturday that year. We ended up having a nice cookout and party with the family because once I started chemo, I wouldn't be able to go out in the sun and just hang out like that. Um, so also that 2 weeks that I was waiting to get the chemo, it was, I wasn't, I didn't have time to sit and really dwell on everything. Um, when you're gonna have chemo, they have to run a bunch of tests. They also had to do the scan to make sure the cancer hadn't spread to any other part of my body. I did end up finding out some really good news at the time of the scan. The cancer wasn't 5 centimeters. It was only about 2 centimeters, which when we found out was amazing news, you know, in the overall, with everything, all the devastating and crazy news, that was one good thing that we found out because we had spent that time thinking that I was at stage 4 or stage 5 and there was a good chance that I wasn't going to make it out. And once we found out it was 2 centimeters, it seemed much more manageable. It it made us more optimistic and more willing to fight harder and being like, I can survive this, I can do this. I felt stronger. But they had to run tests to check my heart because I know one of the chemos, which I think is the doxorubicin, can do a lot of damage on the heart. So they want to make sure your heart is fine and there's nothing wrong before going into it. And really, with the doxorubicin, you can only have a certain amount in your whole lifetime. That's how toxic it really is. Um, with the chemo, I would be doing the doxorubicin and the Cytoxin. The treatment would be once every 2 weeks for 4 rounds. And then after those two were done, I would be doing the Taxol, and they would later add carboplatin and a medication called Keytruda, um, which was an immunotherapy drug, very new. Um, and at that time, I would be getting treatments once a week for 12 rounds. So it was a good 6 months of chemo. Um, I'm going to save that for the next video because I do have the paperwork still from the time of diagnosis on all my chemo. And I did write down the side effects, and I did journal a little bit when I first started going through treatments. So I'm gonna find those journals and get that and make another video and talk about the beginning, what it felt like, what it was like actually getting the treatments, because it's way different than I expected it to be. I mean, I don't know what I was really expecting. Um, I never thought in a million years that I would even be dealing with cancer at the age of 33. Um, but I'm gonna find all that and do a follow-up video on this. Um, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time out to listen. This is actually extremely therapeutic for me. Um, and I'm happy to be able to finally sit down and do this. If there's anybody out there that's newly diagnosed or struggling or in a tough spot, just write me. There's a lot of things that I've, used to get through it. Books, a beautiful app called Belong, and you can talk to a bunch of people that have the same type of cancer, different cancer. It's an app just for people struggling with cancers, not just breast cancer, um, lung cancer, prostate cancer. There's doctors on that app, so if you have any questions, but you can really find people and find a place. I mean, that's why it's called Belong. And that was a beautiful thing throughout my treatment. Anytime that I had, before chemo even started, when I was so scared about what was going to happen, I talked to other women who had went through the same exact treatment as me, and I got, even though everybody's different, I got a good idea of what would be happening and, where I would be going from here and things that would help me get through. And like I said, if there's anybody out there struggling, or you just want to talk, or you need somebody to listen, just write me in the comments. And I just want to be there for anybody who's struggling like I did, or who's in a tough spot. And I don't want anybody to feel like they're alone through any of this. And sometimes you need somebody who's gone through it or is going through it to really understand where you're at or what's going on with you. So thank you so much for your time and for listening to me ramble on. Like I said, the next video I'll go over what chemo was like and the exact treatment, that I went through. So thank you so much for listening, and you guys have a good night.